Welcome back to the Squarespace Entrepreneur Podcast. Today I'm here with Cavalier, and this is a seminal episode because Cav was the first person who tapped me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can you help me with my Squarespace site?" and this was when I was still in the cubicle. I was working at Verizon, and I
Mhm.
was trying to figure my way out. And one of the ways I was figuring was that I would need my website.
Mm.
And so I had been updating my website pretty frequently before I quit my job. And I think, Cav, you stumbled on it around the time where I was trying to create these portals,
Mhm.
the- these
Mhm.
time portals that I could go back to. And so that's why I think it's dope that we could have this conversation now,
Right.
because we're still on the same journey. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And the funny thing about journeys is that, like, you think it's going like straight, but then you realize it's going around.
It went around a lot of times for
Mad times, yeah, like a whirlwind.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So Cav, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself in a moment, but let me introduce you first. Cavalier is a my favorite lyricist.
Oh wow.
I've been listening to you for a long time now, and as far as like rap artists go, like there was a period of time where you were the only one I was listening to. It was like if there was a race, like all of the artists that I grew up with, they dropped off, and you
Oh,
kept going. So you brought me into adulthood, I would say, with
mm,
your music being a soundtrack. Um and and maybe later on we could talk about like some of the other things you've been talking about as it relates to the music and the effect on the generations. But the primary reason that I brought you on the show is because you got a Squarespace website and you've had one for a long time. And
yeah.
Squarespace is a platform for creatives. That's why
Mhm.
I was drawn to the platform. And the challenge that I think every creative has is, how do I sell my stuff?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I sell my stuff? And that, on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, just make a website and put it up there. But I
Right.
think there's a lot of internal things. There's a lot of like inner struggles that go into the process that I've always wanted to bring to surface.
Mm.
Uh, because in my experience, I've learned that it's not as easy as it seems on the
Oh,
surface. Like, it's not,
absolutely not.
just because you have a platform, just because there's technology and tools to do this stuff, like, it's still human beings involved. Like, there's
Oh,
still
yeah.
a human being on the other side that has to say, yeah, I want to buy that. And there's a human element that the technology companies can, in their marketing, can ignore or deny or act like it just happens automatically.
Right, right.
So anyway, Cab man, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your experience with Squarespace as your website platform and what you've been able to do with it to date.
Oh man, for sure. Well, you know,
That's a lot, right?
no, no, no. I
Okay.
think it was very, very, very coherent and very lucid. My name is Cavalier, as you mentioned. My friends call me Cav. Everyone calls me Cav, and I'm an artist and an MC from Brooklyn, based currently in New Orleans. And I've been using Squarespace, I want to say, from probably about 2014. Um, I've owned my domain for a really, really long time. I think
Yeah.
I trusted my instincts. Before I even had anything for sale or anything to show, I purchased my domain some many years ago. And in fact, it used to go to my MySpace page when I was still,
Okay.
yeah,
The mid
learning.
the mid O's.
Yeah, yeah. When I
Hawks.
was still
Yeah.
learning, what I was figuring myself out, and beginning to learn as an artist. And I figured, instead of having people go to myspace.com/ what have you, I
Yeah.
want them to be able to go to a URL and that would be easy to remember.
Mm.
That was the logic I had at the time. I had a couple of songs that I was proud of. I wanted people to hear. I was ready to begin showcasing my art. So that was where things began for me, having my real estate online.
Yeah.
Around 2014, I actually started encountering your art before I met you. I
Yeah.
heard music that you made. I heard raps and songs that you recorded. And then I put together after the fact a video that you did for my brother Maroof.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, oh, this is the same
yeah.
guy. And I thought it was really intriguing also because before people had, I guess, all of the vocabulary about, multimedia artists and,
Mm,
it resonated with me because I also have a background in design. And that brings
right.
me to why I think I gravitated to Squarespace in the first place. As a person who's very visual, and even the way that my process in making music, it's something that I see and then translate.
Yeah,
And Squarespace just made a lot of sense to me. I've done design work in the past, and I've done client based work where I've had to partner with engineers or people who wrote code. So I did have familiarity with what the back end should be like, and
yeah,
I saw there was a user friendliness about Squarespace that just spoke to me. At that time, I didn't really have any goals about selling online or how that would play out into my real estate online as an artist.
yeah.
But I knew that, Squarespace seemed like a fit for me logically.
Right,
And
right.
that's around the time where we connected. And for me, there were things that you were saying that I find relevant increasingly now. And you were saying those things in 2014, 2013, going into 2014. So I felt like this guy, meaning you, knows kind of like where my headspace is, like where my instincts are telling me to go. And
Yeah,
also his map has he's seeing a bit more of the bigger picture, and I felt like a lot of people weren't. My peers weren't. They weren't and I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate to people what I thought was happening, and the interplay between what we create and what becomes content, and then how that becomes e-commerce. So I started wrapping my head around those things and partnering with people like yourself. I have another good brother I need to shout out, Gift from Pay Us No Mind YouTube channel, who provides a lot of services for independent artists in terms of breaking down and analyzing the different platforms to release music and how they serve artists. So he would also give me these insights, but I always felt like I'm getting these insights, but I can't apply them yet. I didn't have a product yet to test these things out. So I kind of just would dock a lot of the information.
yeah.
And slowly, much in thanks to you, I launched my Squarespace site officially around the album that I put out in 2014 called Chief. So at the time,
Sheesh.
it was a big stepping stone for me. Um,
Mm,
it was a re-coming out, so to speak, or an introduction to a larger fan base. And I needed to be able to have people come to one place to learn more about the project, learn about more about me as an artist. And that's how that served. And then over time, the website eventually grew to be a house for most of my work. So
mm.
now, it houses the various projects that I put out since then. It's also my store, and at first, my store made no money. There wasn't really anything on there. I just kind of had a shop by default because it was a feature that I could activate through my Squarespace theme. But it was really during the pandemic that I was able to see the benefits of keeping my real estate online. And what happened was I was able to engage a beta feature on Bandcamp, which is a platform that, a lot of indie artists use to sell their music to fans. And I was one of about a dozen artists that was, selected to engage this beta feature where you could crowdsource a vinyl manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
process through Bandcamp. And how my website came into play, though, even though this happens entirely through Bandcamp, I was able to funnel a lot of the pre-orders through my website, and speak directly to my base and allow them to purchase this pre-order through my site and then eventually send them over to Bandcamp. So it gave me more control, and that allowed me the window to start experimenting on, oh, there's tools here, there's an opportunity here, there's a crossroads. How can I harness, these things?
Yeah, man, that's dope. That is dope. Yeah, and that leads right up to Black Cottonwood,
Mm-hmm.
which you released this month
Mm-hmm.
directly on your website as
Yep.
a digital download
Mm-hmm.
for $15. And And the thing that stood out to me when I saw the email was this will not be available on streaming platforms.
Correct.
And that's something I haven't seen.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't seen
I'm
that.
surprised. People are responding. I'm like, really? People don't do that anymore?
Right. Well, the thing is, if it's not on streaming platforms, there's always the caveat it's coming to streaming platforms. You know what I'm saying? Like, so people will, maybe they'll release the music themselves, but then it's like, all right, in a couple of weeks you can get it on the platforms for convenience. And so you traded in convenience, which has become a commodity,
Mhm.
for for what I now call digital nostalgia, the value of digital nostalgia, downloading music in a zip file,
Right.
unzipping it, and loading the music up and being like, all right, what's this? Like, I haven't had that experience since the MySpace days. Like, since pre 2013 ish.
Right.
Um, it went from downloading music as the default, right? Downloading MP3s for free as the default to streaming music for free as the default to now, well, if there's physical product, that's worth something to me. But
Right.
you've now brought the value back to music in a digital format for yourself,
Yeah.
with your audience. And I think this is the type of thing that, like, probably wouldn't work in 2014, because in 2014 people be like, why is it not here? Why is it not there?
Right. Right.
Why is it not on Apple Music? Why is it not, you know? But I don't know what questions you got, but for me it was like, yeah, this is where it's supposed to be.
Right. Right.
Like, cavwins.com is the platform, you know.
Yeah.
Um
And also, people forget about you pay for your digital real estate, right?
yeah, it
You
ain't free.
essentially pay rent or you pay a mortgage, let's say, right? Because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
my home, but I pay for maintenance. I pay to continue to have access to my address.
yeah,
And if you're paying to do that, your hope would be that in some way it pays for itself. I think, there's a lot of things I've done intuitively that later on became I guess a more reputable strategy.
uh-huh,
When I released the Lemonade project in the end of 2015, going into 2016, at that time the project was not available on digital streaming. It
mm-hmm,
it was only available via Bandcamp, and it did gain its own kind of cult following. And it also, gave me a lot of steam at that time. It launched a small tour,
yeah,
and we were content with keeping it on Bandcamp because at that time, Bandcamp had really begun to nurture its fan base and its following, and it became a
mm-hmm,
culture of people who engaged the platform because they believed it was supporting artists and they wanted to support the artists that they liked directly. So that project lived on Bandcamp exclusively for about a year, and then at the year anniversary of that project, then we released it on digital streaming platforms, kind of like how you mentioned. But it took a
yeah,
whole year, and a lot happened in that year, and I think that served me better because you like all businesses, you engage or you pay for promotional services. And when we put out Lemonade, that wasn't a resource we could take advantage of at the time.
yeah,
So using our following on Bandcamp, I think allowed for a better response a year later when it did come out on digital streaming because people kind of were checking for it. Now they appreciated the convenience now.
right,
I used SoundCloud at that time as well in an atypical way. We put the project up on SoundCloud, but instead of putting it up track by track, we put it as one long play out, and it required listeners to listen to the whole project. And for me, that was about bringing back, like you said, the nostalgia of an album, of a
yeah,
project in its entirety, and fighting against the disposability of playlist culture. And so these were things I just did intuitively. Now I have a bit more like understanding of how these things work and a bit more access to the data and having an idea of who my fans are and who I'm looking for. And I
yeah,
think that helped with the Black Cottonwood release.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it's like, yeah, I know there's some people that are looking for this. And like my brother Gift from Pay Us No Mind would say, sometimes people will go where you tell them to go, you know?
mm-hmm,
A lot of times the convenience is because everything is telling them to go to Spotify. Everything's telling them to go. We forget that we used to go to MySpace because we thought that's where you had to go for new acts and new music.
Yeah.
And we also used to go to iTunes.
Blogs.
But I'm a person who personally I don't have I've never purchased any music on iTunes. I
Yeah.
I don't have a pro Spotify account. I don't have Apple Music, and I never have. It's not because I'm against those platforms. It just wasn't in my habit to
Hmm.
consume music in that way. So it was a bit easier for me to figure out my ways to engage these platforms that were different than the average user.
Yo, all right. Transition me to your relationship with email now, versus what it may have been once upon a time. Like I remember, the reason I put out an album on Bandcamp in 2010 because I wanted email addresses.
Mm.
I had put out music before on a popular blog at the time, but it was just thousands of downloads, but I don't know who downloaded
Yeah,
it.
you
You
don't
know what I'm
know.
saying?
Right.
But then the thing was when I put out the album on Bandcamp, it went from thousands of downloads to like 100. So I
Mm.
might have had 100 and some emails, but in my mind at the time, that wasn't enough. It was like there was always this way always this thing between like maximum fame, I guess you just let's say maximum fame, right? Maximum reach or an actual relationship with the people who just downloaded the thing.
Right, right.
And I know my problem for a long time was like I was always looking above the heads in front of me to some heads way over there. Um, till eventually the heads in front of me was like, man, this dude ain't paying us no mind.
You think that's what it was? You
Maybe that's just me talking. Not maybe that's my own self-judgment. But my point though is that like email is a valuable resource for an artist that especially in music that I think is still undervalued.
Yeah.
Um and, I mean and the phone number as well, but I think people downplay the usage of email. It's how I get into everything. Like I can't
Right,
I
right.
can't really function on the internet without my email. I can function on the internet without my phone number, but I can't function online without my email.
Well, I dare say some of that is slightly generational.
Mm,
Because I think that I run into some of our younger peers and they're not as email savvy as you would think, despite having more regular familiarity with a handheld computer, aka
right.
smartphone. When they don't have the same
Oh yeah.
culture.
Oh yeah. You could just sign up
Email
with your
urgency.
phone number. I forget that.
Right, right. The email urgency or just like the importance of using email as a professional way to communicate,
Yeah.
they don't really have a lot of they're not on it the same way, right?
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
the same time, the email marketing is so key. I mean, I still get emails from like Def Jam, right? When Def
Mm,
Jam puts out a new project, and I don't remember, when I ever signed up for their email list. I just never
yeah.
subscribed. But my old email address still gets newsletters from Def Jam when an artist drops a project, right? So that just shows the power of email marketing. I mean, especially now during the holidays, I must have gotten 100 emails from Macy's or Ralph Lauren. I get
Mm-hmm.
emails from Ralph Lauren, multiple times a day because I'm a customer and they know that because they have my email address. So
Yeah.
now they email me all the time. And I've recognized my own habit of becoming a person who will open a sales email and possibly click. And the fact
Yeah.
that I also haven't unsubscribed means there's a part of me subconsciously that knows that I may open something I like from this one day. So,
Yeah.
I also remember taking note from who is it? Um oh, what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. Uh that he went to Harvard. Why
Ryan Leslie.
Ryan Leslie.
Yeah.
Ryan Leslie, I think, is when we, you know, Ryan Leslie deserves so many flowers. Aside from being just a brilliant person and a musician,
Yeah.
he recognized some of those pitfalls of the industry really early, and he started doing things directly to his fan base via email.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I didn't realize the importance of that at that time, but it definitely docked itself in my brain. I was like, wow. And now there's a lot of artists that you can name that were more household names to us, years ago or maybe a decade plus, and you think that maybe they're not as active. They are active, but they're speaking to their fans directly.
Right.
They tour regularly, and I started seeing the value of that. I used to use an email list many years ago, I think my site used to exist on WordPress at one point. Um, and I would send out an email blast, but I never wanted to come off spammy. I always wanted the voice of my brand to feel genuine and to feel like I was having engaged dialogue with people. And I
Mm,
noticed that even those years back, when I would send out emails, they would be maybe 4 emails a year, that infrequent. But when I would send them out, they absolutely would get responses. So people would respond to the email. And I thought that was interesting because when I get emails from, other blasts, I don't send a reply, you
yeah.
know. So that meant to some degree it was working. And there's people who are on my list who've been on the list since that time,
Mm,
since that have been following me since some of the first works that I've put out. So I've recently reactivated my email list and integrated that with my site and started communicating more openly about like, hey, sign up on my email list. That's the way to get clear ideas of what I'm doing. That's the
mm,
way to have more direct communication with me outside of social media, especially because these platforms, I remember last year, Instagram went down for a couple of days and everyone was losing their minds. And I had a thought. I was like, there's some people who, if they lost their Instagram account, they've lost their entire following,
your whole business.
their whole business, their following, and all their notoriety. And I was like, I don't want to be at the mercy of Meta to continue my career or to continue my conversation with the people who support me.
Yeah.
So it definitely put a little bit more urgency for me in reactivating my email list.
Yeah. Have you thought about this, this sounds corny to me. Text message marketing?
No, that's not corny at all.
Not just the words together.
Yeah, yeah. No, I have thought about it. I actually do have I do have a lot of people have given me their phone numbers,
Yeah,
but I um I haven't engaged that quite yet. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And so I'm getting I do have that data and I recognize its importance. I leave it to people to volunteer that. And it also depends on how they sign up to my site. If they
right.
sign up via my link tree, there's more fields for me to collect that information. It's something about Linktree, I think, makes people comfortable like going directly from Twitter or Instagram to that link and then
Mm-hmm.
fill out those forms. But yeah, I think in the future I would, but very targeted in a way
Right.
where I can combine the knowledge of where people are,
Yep.
like I know what city they're in, and
Yeah.
if I can use the information that way and say, oh, hey, I'm in your city or I'm doing something really special, especially I've done collaborations in certain industries that aren't as accessible in other markets. So, for example, I partner with a couple cannabis brands and cannabis entities, and not every state has the same legalities with that. So it's good to be able to show up to a city that and be like, hey, we're doing this kind of event. And it allows me to screen who legally can be there, 21 and over, or also you can't market cannabis events on like Facebook marketing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Some of these platforms prevent you from doing that. So that's something I do want to engage in the future. But I am admittedly hitting a space where like managing all of those at the same time is a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to educate myself more on the different tools to automate or possibly even getting assistance or a virtual assistant, but I'm still measuring. I'm still measuring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the reason I bring it up is because that's what Ryan Leslie innovated, the superphone.
Ah,
Which is all that's all it is and it's I haven't used it recently. I used it when it first kind of came out to
mhm.
test it, but I think now they've kind of just expanded to e-commerce as a whole. So like e-commerce is making use of this like left and right.
Mm.
But I do have a couple of artist friends who have been using it, and it is effective because every time I get the text, I think it's for me, and then I'm reminded. I'm like, oh no, it's not.
But
It's
that's
not.
great. If you feel that way, that means something about the voice of whoever's communicating. They're doing a good job because they're making
Yeah,
it feel like they're talking directly to you.
and it's my text message inbox. So I'm not. There's no other brand in my text message. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So I'm never expecting to be invited to. Well, actually, I am expected to. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. So um now I want to switch to the business model, right? Like the thing about all of these platforms, whether it's Bandcamp, um, or Spotify or whoever, they're providing a service for the artist and they're providing a service for the artist's fans, right? And they're getting paid either through advertising or taking a percentage of the sale,
Yep.
so that they can continue carrying out that service.
Correct.
Now, as a one person artist, I call it business minded creative. As a one person business minded creative, um, you have the same potential and opportunity, right? Because you have a service that you're providing to your fans
Right.
directly, which is the art, but also the delivery of the art is a service.
Mm-hmm.
And delivering that art through your website directly is a service to the fan because, like you said, the fan can now access all these other aspects of what you got going on.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you taken away from, the perpetual pain of musicians of like, yo, how do I get paid, to how do I pay myself kind of thing, like, or because here's the thing is, I think a lot of artists don't realize that the money has to come from somewhere. It's
Yes.
not like even in jobs, people forget that like they're customers. Like money is not just like magically showing up; it has to travel. So making that, cutting out that distance, right? So it doesn't have to go through Bandcamp, or so it doesn't have to go. I don't have to, listen to a bunch of ads on Spotify to appreciate the music. I could just go straight to you.
Yeah.
What what have you taken away from being able to do that now?
I'm still determined in that, to be honest, because I'm not past the point of any of those things where it's established so firmly that I don't engage those other avenues,
Right.
right? Like one thing about digital streaming platforms is the discovery aspect. It has an ability to put you on other radars and other ears that you wouldn't normally be able to access on your own. Whereas with doing it directly from my website, I'm counting on being able to access people who already, maybe checking for my product or checking for me as an artist. So I'm sacrificing some of that discovery. At the same time, my hope is that nothing beats word of mouth. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how far we get in technology. There's nothing that will defeat the first person referral, right?
Yep.
Especially in music. There's an album can come out that might be acclaimed or wildly popular, and I still might not listen to it
I'll
until like
tell you. Yeah.
Omari's like, "Yo, Cat, check that out," and I'm like, "You know what? Because you told me to. Oh, you feel it?
Just
Now
yeah,
I'm gonna
just
check it
yeah,
out."
yeah.
Right. So my hope is that this process restores some of that, and to be honest, a lot of my brand taps into um, collectability, limited edition,
Yep.
and nostalgia.
Yep.
So I think it made sense to some degree, at least for my core followers. And if any of the logic that we heard in the aughts was true about you only need 100 true fans, if that is indeed the case, I just felt it was better for me to gamble finding my 100 true friends through the pool where it seemed people were actually rocking with me, as opposed to um, the abyss of, what 50,000 plus songs come out every day on Spotify alone. Am I going to find my 100 true fans with those odds? And it didn't, maybe, but
Hmm.
I felt like I had a better shot nurturing, the ones that I knew were present,
Yeah.
and doing it there. So I think it's both that I'm in a space where I'm still exploring how both serve me, and then bringing it back to what you mentioned about these platforms like Bandcamp. Are they creating something? They None of them have reinvented the wheel, right? They're all doing some version of like what we saw on MySpace. Come to this portal, come to my individual page on this portal, see my art, hear my music. And I'm like, okay, well, in this era, particularly now where you can use a lot of web-based services that have templates, right?
Hmm.
Like Squarespace, why can't you build that portal yourself? Especially when you're using these portals, if you look at it, you're getting taxed multiple times. It's not just the service of Bandcamp. You're also getting taxed on the transaction per sale. So I posted a screenshot a couple of days ago on Twitter, encouraging fans to support us directly, because the screenshot was of the sale of a single from Bandcamp. And it showed how much the single cost, which was $2. It showed how much I paid in their revenue share. program. It showed how much I paid in these other processor fees and all of that. And then it was my balance, what I received at the end, and it was zero. So here's my single for sale
Yeah.
for $2, which is double what a single used to cost on iTunes.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, I received $0.
Mm.
And I was just like, something's wrong in that equation. At the same time on Bandcamp, when you sell physical merchandise, you kind of go around some of those fees, like some of the revenue share things. So it showed me kind of like we still want something that we can appreciate in the real world. And even if it's a digital good, because even now um, we're talking about iTunes and downloading MP3s with nostalgia. We're talking about that like that's a CD or like
Yeah.
that's like a
Yeah.
physical good.
Yep.
It's just showing you how quickly these things are changing. And I'm a person, here I am, a grown man. I'm selling cassette tapes. I've sold more cassette tapes in the last couple years than, I wouldn't even have thought to put out a cassette when I first came out. We were trying to get people to buy your CDs. And I remember a time where people would be standing in front of Fat Beats or standing in Times Square in New York City, harassing you to buy their CD, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it was only a matter of time before there was kind of this convergence of how do independent artists put their art for the masses, and also how does the listener be able to have that relationship with the artist that they like, where they feel like there's a connection or some type of personal experience.
Yeah. Man, I mean, listen, I think that's what you're great at, by the way, as an artist, is you don't have those walls up.
Mm.
You come across as very accessible and personable and almost democratic with your artistry, which I think resonates with your audience. As a member of your audience, I'm giving you this feedback. And I think, to your point about the 100 true fans, I've been thinking about it. I think it's somewhere between 100 and 1,000. I
I
think,
think so too. Yeah, yeah. Because I'd
yeah.
really prefer 1,000.
But if it's 100, it's about feeding them more frequently. With
Mm.
100, it's about frequency. With 1,000, you can hit them, you can break them off with a meal, a few meals a year.
If it's
But
consistent, it's like
yeah,
frequency versus consistency.
yeah, and I would challenge you to keep experimenting with your core, because I have an intuition and a hunch that your core, like, they don't care about the other stuff. They just want to show up for you. And
Mm.
and I don't know what you sitting on. I don't know how much music you got sitting on. But if there's some way that the core could partake.
Yeah, but it's funny you mentioned that. Like Quelle and I, he brilliantly, when we made Black Cottonwood, he said, name it Death Tape One, Black Cottonwood.
Hmm.
And he christened it the first of a series, which meant that we now have the opportunity to repeat this process and continue to feed our following, feed our community. I rather refer to the audience as a community than just
Hmm.
necessarily fans, because I think fans is what you have when you have the Spotify experience, where it's so
Yeah,
distinguishable.
separate.
But we're in an era now where people want to believe they're a part of something that's genuine, and they want to feel like what they're supporting resonates with them as an individual. That being said, this also allows us to share vaulted music or things that maybe couldn't have come out previously because of contractual things or weird industry practices. And now it's like, no, the census is on our terms. We can put it out on our terms.
Yeah.
So we do have music. I do have music that I've been sitting on. And also I'm a person who had to break my own reclusive shell, and wrap my head around I didn't want to have a chip on my shoulder, bro. In all honesty.
Mm,
But I hit a point in the pandemic where, just being fully candid, where this stuff wasn't feeling good to me anymore. I was
hmm.
questioning if I didn't want just making money to be the inspiration or the need to why I created. Oh, let me create a project, because if I don't, I'm not going to pay my rent. Like, that's an awful spot to be in to
Yeah.
create. And it just felt counter to where my spirit was. And I felt like there was really no difference, particularly 2020, when there was a lot of judgment and dialogue about OnlyFans, you know, and how people engage that platform. I was like, well, what's different between that and Spotify? To
Hmm.
me, they were exactly the same.
Yeah.
Spotify's telling me I have to hold myself. I have to make myself extremely available via my output. And that if I don't do that, then I'm not really a contender on the platform. That if I don't feed the machine at that rate, that in that quality control didn't matter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is not kind of like why I stepped into this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, but now it's like, now that I'm working through those things and I can find places where I feel comfortable, like, yo, this is art that I care about, but I'm finding the people who care about it as well. Okay,
Yeah,
let's do that. And we can cut
yeah,
around the middlemen and all these people who tax me in the process.
yeah. Because man, listen, I did the math. It as one individual listener, right? I download the project for $15. It could sit on my hard drive and I could not play it at all.
Mhm.
But if you were to generate that same $15 for me on Spotify, I would have to stream it a couple thousand times at least.
Yes.
Right? That's
Oh,
time. That
way
yeah,
more than
right.
that.
Like that, so like to me, the economics and the math just makes a whole lot more sense direct.
Yeah.
Because I think ultimately, I think as an artist, you want them, you want your own machine. You
Yeah.
want to create your own machine where your creativity can still be free, but the machine is kind of helping you to keep
To
producing it.
sustain. To
Yeah,
sustain.
sustain. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of where you're at. You're at like you're looking at the machine, man. The machine is in process of being, you've been building it for a long time, but um I think it's right here with the core.
Mm.
Because like, man, I'm just happy for you with this,
Thank
man.
you, man. Thank you. That
you know,
means a lot, man. It means a lot. I watch the videos that you put out. I
yeah,
watch the content and I read your newsletter. So it's interesting too, because when you're in a space like that and it's centered around people with e-commerce, as an artist, you're kind of wondering, where do I really
yeah.
fit into this? Because you're selling a product that's not always tangible and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
fulfill a physical world need, so to speak. That
Yep.
might not be the best descriptor, but I know you know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah, exactly.
Kind of giving something to people that they have to psychologically feel like they want. And some of the rules with e-commerce don't translate there the same way, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
can scroll through Instagram and you'll see a lot of videos about someone telling me like, I'm going to show you how I made all this money in my e-commerce business, drop shipping. But I'm like, none of that applies to me. You know, how do I scale my business? How do I scale my product if it's not married to those same principles in the same way?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that it's not, but and also personally, and a lot of artists I think have this issue sometimes, is recognizing that you're putting out a product, that it is a product, that yes, this is my art and I'm connected to it and I feel it's, connection to what I've created. At the same time, it's a product that I'm putting in the marketplace. So analogy I also share with other artists, I'm like, look, you have a cake shop. You want to sell your cakes. Are you not going to take out an ad in the yellow pages to let people know that you got cakes for sale? Otherwise, all the cakes you made are just going to melt in the window. Someone
Mm-hmm.
has to know that your storefront is there and that you got cakes for sale. So if you're not going to put an ad in the yellow pages, or you're not going to tell all your friends and family to tell their friends and family, what are you doing to let people know that you got cakes for sale? You could have the best cakes, but the guy who's putting out the ads, he's selling more cakes than you.
Yeah.
It's just like that, and it helped me remove some of like the emotional ties to my product,
Right.
to recognize it that way. Now for me, the challenge has been, okay, I found some of these people. I've how do I now amplify this message?
Mm-hmm.
How do I sustain it? Because campaigns of these type, as you know, and in e-commerce of all sorts, you kind of hit an initial spike and then it
Yeah.
tapers off depending on the size of your audience. And we're hitting that point now. And I think that's what made me like, let me hit up Omari O'Neal. Like, am I doing this correctly? Like, and fortunately, this type of product didn't really have any real overhead, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I had to go manufacture a lot of things and be sitting on it. And I think that's a beautiful space to be in right now. When I was first starting out as an artist, there was an OG artist that I spoke to, and I thought he was so like, established because he had vinyls and he had records in stores, and stuff like that. And one day he looked at me, he said, "The worst thing you could be is an artist with boxes of your own CD and records in your crib."
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, and I saw that visual. I was like, wow, because when you're creating, you're so intent on like creating the thing, creating the album and finishing it. And then you do that. Now, let's say, especially in the CD era, let's say you paid and printed up 500 CDs, and then they come, you're excited, you open your box of 500 CDs, and then you realize, damn, 500 of everything is a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot. This is a heavy box. Can I sell this box? And
Yeah.
to be honest, at that time, the answer for me was no. And it's not because 500 people wouldn't have bought it. I just didn't know how. I still have some of the CDs from when I first ordered, X amount of CDs from CD Baby or whoever it is.
Hmm.
But the turnaround being that by the time I did the crowdsourced vinyl with Bandcamp, my album sold out in 8 days. Of a 30-day campaign, I sold out in 142% of my goal was met. So
Word.
that showed me, okay, you know, you it's weird. People tell you about supply and demand. I'm
Yeah.
still negotiating these things, but
Hmm.
when you find that space, you have information. Because even with Spotify, right, you can get 1 million plays on your song, let's say, but what if 1 million people only played your song once?
Once. Yeah.
Because it was featured on a playlist, or the label you were on, or what the promo team, they got it placed, and 1 million people heard it because Spotify told them to listen, and that was it. And not only did they listen once and then never listen again, you don't even know who listened.
Hmm.
So seeing the value in that more and more and more, and just being open to learning how to harness that, because I'm still working to figure it out. Like, even as today is the day after Christmas, everybody else is relaxing. Quell are on the phone, like, okay, well, we got a visual we're about to release. How do we release the visual? How do
Hmm.
we alert people? I haven't converted the percentage that I would like from the people. There was a high spike traffic to my Squarespace site when we did launch the Black Cottonwood release. How do
Yeah.
I get those people who came to be more of them to be the ones that purchased?
Hmm. The metric that I like, that is number one for me right now is return customers.
Mm,
Because if you know how many of those Black Cottonwood customers had gotten the vinyl a couple years ago, or gotten a cassette or whatever, um, that becomes like your new core,
mm,
right? Because those are the one, because there's always going to be a very small percentage, a very, very small percentage that get everything.
yeah, and I do have some of those.
And if you feed them, if you make them the priority, then it's almost a trickle down effect,
Mm,
right? Because feeding them gives you certainty, it gives them what they value most,
right, right.
and that like one-to-one relationship that you have, it becomes one to many. But like, you know obviously many is a few in the beginning, but like harnessing that energy allows you to create more on the sample front, right? So like, uh Spotify or any streaming platform where people get the samples,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
is in like, you could literally give them the 30-second clips. You could upload the 30-second clips to
Right.
Spotify.
I was tempted to.
And,
We've been talking about. I've been tempted to do that.
and in the album title or whatever, put the website. Like, there's some really, now that I'm thinking about it, there's some little ways you can go about it, where you literally, because no one really does this, right? No one like takes that audience and then sends them anywhere else. They're just happy to get them
It
there.
used to be a thing, though. It used to be a thing. It's just
Yeah.
that I don't know. Maybe we're getting technological
Lazy.
amnesia. No, amnesia.
uh
Things are happening so fast that we forget what we used to do 3-4 years ago.
yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
the fact that we're talking about MP3s, and it's interesting too. Also, the culture of certain devices. At one point, Apple was telling us to, put your MP3 collection on this product we have. You can carry your whole MP3 collection with you, and then they
Hmm.
made you get rid of it.
Hmm.
So I'm
Now we'll
like,
hold
all
on
right,
to it for you.
yeah, we'll hold on to it
You
for
keep
you.
the phone.
Yeah, just keep the phone. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting how they switched it up. At the same time, you know, I also didn't reinvent the wheel. You go on my page, I'm offering you the same thing that I offered you on Bandcamp.
Yeah.
Here I am. Here's the
Hmm.
link to purchase it. Here's a player for you to hear what you're about to purchase. The
Yeah.
only difference is I took it back. I saw someone, the journalist from Stereo Gum, wrote about it gave him that nostalgic. He said nostalgic, that iTunes, that 30-second clip iTunes. I was like, Dad, we're that far ahead that's nostalgic now, but
Yo,
apparently it is.
it is, yeah, crazy.
That did help, the player with the 30-second clips.
Yeah.
And that's a nod to actually the era where you would get sample CDs or sample tapes to promote an artist. I remember when I was a kid, I got an Eminem sample tape once, and
Hmm.
it had snippets of what Eminem was about to release.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes me think like what's gonna be nostalgic in 10 years from now, you know? Um, like my son, the oldest, Shiloh, he's 9 now. He's turning 9 this week. um I've kind of raised him on my stuff. So he's grown up with my Game Boy that I had. You
Mm,
know what I'm saying? He's grown up with a cassette player, uh playing my record, playing my vinyl, like all
beautiful.
types of analog experiences.
Mhm,
I've immersed him in analog experiences. I mean, he still has access to everything else,
mhm.
but that's kind of, I guess, semi-intentional on my part, because it's like, well, it's kind of made him more time conscious. Like
Mm.
he's aware of different eras. He'll watch something and be like, oh, that looks like it's from the 90s, or that looks like it's from the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he thinks about the future in a similar way, like I'm gonna look back on right now and all these kind of things, right? So it makes me think, like, with the technology progressing as quickly as it is,
Mhm.
um, and this kind of a return, because like you said, it's nothing new. It's just the
Yeah.
formats change and we come back to the same thing, but with new sentiment. Like, oh, this is way more amazing than it used to be. Like growing up as a kid, vinyl wasn't cool, but then as I became a young adult, it felt good to have my own little
Yeah.
vinyl
Well,
collection.
what's funny though, right? Like that's an experience maybe some of us had with our parents. We,
Hmm.
we played with their vinyls. I experienced vinyl more through my parents and their collections than obviously my own, but that's how I knew what it was. When I would see television shows, I could identify the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Through the wardrobe and through the feel, and I guess the epigenetic nostalgia of my parents, right?
Hmm.
And where it's so funny, like 90s culture is popular in the way that 70s culture was when we were kids.
Yep.
And we haven't realized that we're old as fuck now. So like
Yeah. Oh
that's
no.
that's why we're like, yo, the 90s. I'm like, yo, this is how they showed the 70s on TV when I
Yeah.
was a little kid in the 90s. We're like
Yeah.
this. And now we're like, oh, the 90s, and we're starting to see that happen with the early 2000s. So I'm not sure, you know, are we gonna all need, to have a Kanye hologram machine? But they shown us those things in the past too. I think some of it is more about tapping into an analog mindset than it is predicting what's going to happen technologically, because
Yeah.
there will always be a want for direct connection. There'll
Yep.
always be a want for a genuine experience, and for people to feel like they're having a genuine experience they can share with others. So no matter what the technology will be, if it taps into that, that's what's going to make it prosper, right? Because remember mini disc?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
That was supposed to be the wave, and my pops bought a mini disc player. Like, oh, you can hold so much more in this, and then there's certain European markets that were like, yeah, we out here on mini disc, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't buy
Japan and stuff.
I,
Yeah.
I didn't buy a mini disc. That didn't take over, right? Like
Hmm.
Betamax didn't take over, right? Certain things we thought the industry or technology told us this was going to be the thing, and it wasn't, because it was missing one of those other factors that I talked about.
Mm. Yeah. So I think because it's convenience. Like mini disc wasn't convenient. I had to like do all this kind of stuff to get my music on there. I needed a mini disc recorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think as an artist, the value you provide is belonging. The problem that the listener faces is that, where do I fit in the world? You know what I'm saying? And music is often your soundtrack. Like I reflect on my musical consumption growing up, and music is like is literally like what I used to create my reality once I learned that I could use music to create my reality.
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that music is a reality creating device. Like it, if you got the right music playing, you could get and enter any state of emotional state that you want to enter in and carry out whatever acts you want to do. You
Yeah.
know, so the reason I bring that up is because, like, you know, as from the artist perspective, like that is really, important,
Mm.
um, because like that that like one that shared it's a shared reality creation experience. That's
Mm.
what you're providing the listener. And so the music creates the world where they could like move in and
Yeah.
deal with their issues and relationships and so on, and kind of navigate uh as far as you've been,
Right.
as
Right.
far as you've gone. So your your journey is the most critical thing for you, because that's what people are latching onto
Mhm.
for their own telling of their own story and journey. Man, Cavalier, yo, I really appreciate this conversation.
Same, man. Grateful to reconnect in this space. And grateful for the insights, man. It's all helpful, including dialogues like this. Like,
Yeah,
I don't ever want to step somewhere and pretend I have all the answers. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for the builds like this because they help lead not just to like success, but the sense that we're not lost in all of this.
yeah, yeah. We're not alone.
Yeah, exactly.